What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? You get the most explosive, heartwarming, and completely unpredictable love story that's about to unfold. No executive assistant had ever survived more than 3 weeks working for the ice-cold tech billionaire Alexander Stone, until one fearless woman walked through his doors and refused to back down, no matter how many coffee cups he hurled across the room. Before we dive into this incredible journey, drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the globe. Jessica Parker was magnificently late for the most crucial interview of her life, which felt perfectly on brand for how her entire month had been spiraling. Her apartment had flooded, her ancient Toyota had died on the highway, and now she was speedwalking through downtown Boston in borrowed heels that were 3 sizes too large, clutching a coffee-stained resume and whatever dignity she had left. She burst through the revolving doors of Stone Industries Tower like a hurricane, nearly colliding with a marble pillar. The security guard raised an eyebrow as she stumbled toward the reception desk, her oversized blazer sliding off one shoulder. Jessica Parker, interview for executive assistant, 9 cars AM, she announced breathlessly to the pristine receptionist. "Shah, I know it's 9:23 and yes, the subway broke down. And yes, I got lost in this maze of a building. And yes, I may have accidentally grabbed decaf instead of regular coffee this morning. But you can still read my resume through the stains." The receptionist blinked slowly, as if watching a documentary on fast forward. "Mr. Stone doesn't tolerate tardiness." Jessica flashed her brightest smile. "Perfect. I don't tolerate intimidation tactics." "So we're starting off balanced." The receptionist hesitated, then pressed a button. "Mr. Stone, your candidate has arrived." 10 minutes later, Jessica stepped into an office that looked more like a minimalist art gallery than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline, and every piece of furniture appeared to cost more than her annual rent. Behind an imposing glass desk sat Alexander Stone himself, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, steel gray hair swept back with military precision, ice blue eyes that could freeze hell over. Jessica took a deep breath. "Don't trip, don't spill anything, and definitely don't stare. You're late, and there's lipstick on your teeth," he said without looking up from her crumpled resume. Jessica froze. She ran her tongue over the corner of her mouth, not even trying to hide it. "And you look like the villain from a dystopian thriller. Got any streaming recommendations?" Alexander looked up at her for the first time. Long seconds of silence. The whole room seemed to freeze. "Your resume is wrinkled." "Blame my messenger bag. It has a personal vendetta against important documents. Incomplete degree. College and I had creative differences." "They wanted conformity. I wanted creativity. No experience as an executive assistant. But I do have a talent for finding missing office supplies, and I make excellent coffee. Plus, I'm fluent in sarcasm and optimism." She smiled, trying not to show the panic bubbling in her stomach. Alexander studied her like she was a complex equation that didn't add up. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Me, why do you want this position?" "Because I have rent to pay, a cat who thinks he's Gordon Ramsay, and a remarkable gift for getting fired before probation periods end." He raised an eyebrow. Jessica winced but maintained her composure. "Okay, too honest. I can pretend I'm passionate about spreadsheets and corporate hierarchies if that's what you prefer." Alexander let out a soft sigh. "Every candidate before you was perfectly behaved. Complete waste of time." She sat down without waiting for permission. "Good behavior is overrated." Another pause. Alexander closed the folder. "The position is temporary. 1-month trial. If you survive, you stay." Survive sounds about right, judging by the look the receptionist gave me. Jessica stood up, surprised she was still there. "All right, Mr. Stone, challenge accepted. This should be interesting, or at least chaotic. Start tomorrow, 8 sharp. 7:58. Just to keep you on your toes. As she left the office, skirt finally in place and lipstick fixed, Jessica didn't notice the curious glances from the staff in the glass break room. Whispers started immediately. "How long do you think she'll last?" one analyst murmured. 5 days, maximum. "Did you see his expression?" "I say 3 days. If she survives the first coffee mishap, it'll be a miracle." Inside the office, Alexander Stone slowly spun his pen between his fingers, still thinking about that strangely honest candidate. Something about her disturbed him, or maybe intrigued him. He wasn't sure yet. Jessica showed up at exactly 7:58, just like she promised. The receptionist watched her like she was witnessing a rare astronomical event. In the elevator, she overheard 2 employees whispering. "The new assistant started today," one said. "Poor soul. Remember Amanda? She lasted 3 weeks, spent the last 5 days crying in the bathroom. And Patricia, 2 weeks, quit via email at 2 a.m. The record was Susan, 6 days, ran out during lunch and never returned." Jessica pretended not to hear, but her stomach tightened. When the elevator reached the 35th floor, she took a deep breath and walked over to the desk that would be her battlefield for the next 30 days, if she made it that far. The desk was positioned right outside Alexander's office, like a command center or a combat zone. Jessica reviewed his schedule. Meetings scheduled every hour. No breaks, not even to breathe, apparently. At 8:15, Alexander stepped out of his office for the first time. He stopped when he saw Jessica organizing the files into rainbow-colored stacks. "What are you doing?" "Creating a system. Green for urgent, yellow for important, blue for can wait until the heat death of the universe." "There's already a system, and it's worked flawlessly for 5 years." Jessica looked at his icy stare. "Well, now we have 2 systems. A little healthy competition never hurt anyone." Alexander stared at her for a full 3 seconds. Then he went back into his office, closing the door slightly harder than necessary. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. Jessica answered enthusiastically. "Stone Industries. This is Jessica speaking. How can I help make your day extraordinary?" Silence on the other end. "Sorry, who's this?" "Jessica, the new assistant. Who would you like to speak with?" Well, I usually speak directly with Alexander." "This is Brandon Mitchell from Mitchell and Associates." Jessica checked the calendar. "Oh, Mr. Mitchell, you're scheduled for a meeting Thursday. Would you like me to confirm the time?" "Actually, I'm calling about the Denver contract. I need to speak with Alexander urgently." "Perfect. I'll transfer you right away." Jessica randomly pushed buttons on the phone until she managed to transfer the call. Alexander picked up on the first ring. 2 minutes later, he emerged from his office again. "You transferred Mitchell to the marketing department." "Oops. I'm still learning this phone. It has more buttons than a NASA control panel." "Mitchell is our most crucial client. He can't be redirected to marketing when he's calling about legal contracts." "Got it. Mitchell equals crucial. Marketing equals forbidden territory." Jessica scribbled on her notepad. Can I ask why he sounded worried?" Alexander hesitated. "There's an issue with the contract clause. Nothing for you to worry about." Before he turned to go back in, Jessica smacked her forehead. "Oh, I almost forgot. A gentleman dropped off a package for you earlier. I signed for it." "What package?" "He was waiting in the lobby. Said he was from the law firm and needed to deliver urgent documents." Jessica pointed to a folder on the desk. "Seemed important." Alexander frowned and picked up the folder. His eyes scanned the contents quickly. "Jessica, that wasn't just any delivery person. That was David Morrison, senior partner at Morrison & Associates, and these are confidential documents for the Mitchell contract." "Oops." He was wearing jeans and sneakers. How was I supposed to know? Alexander kept reading, his expression slowly changing. and you signed as a company representative. I signed as Jessica Parker, guardian of important deliveries. Pretty creative, right? Jessica, you're not authorized to... He stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on one particular page. Wait, where exactly did you sign? Here. She pointed to a line at the bottom of the document. Why? Alexander looked at the signature, then the date, then the location where she had signed. Jessica, you just uncovered a legal loophole our attorneys have been searching for 3 weeks. I uncovered what? By signing here on this specific line, you technically validated a clause that protects our interests in the Mitchell contract. He looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. This could save a $20 million deal. Jessica blinked several times. Thought I did something right. You accomplished something 3 Harvard-trained lawyers couldn't. Wow. And I didn't even finish community college. Alexander went back to his office without another word, taking the documents with him. Jessica stared at the closed door, trying to process what had just happened. At 10 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, Jessica checked the caller ID before answering. To Stone Industries, Jessica speaking. Hello, may I speak with Alexander Stone? The voice was female, impatient. May I ask who's calling? This is Margaret Stone, his mother. Jessica almost dropped the phone. Oh, Mrs. Stone. One moment, please. This time, she transferred the call correctly. A few seconds later, she heard Alexander answer in a completely different tone. Hi, Mom. The call lasted exactly 3 minutes. When Alexander hung up, Jessica heard a deep sigh from his office. At 11, he left for an external meeting. Jessica took the opportunity to explore her new desk more thoroughly. In the third drawer, she found a 150-page manual. Executive Assistant Manual. Protocols and Guidelines for the CEO's Assistant. She flipped through it quickly. Rules on answering phones, organizing documents, scheduling meetings, serving coffee, even greeting visitors. Jessica closed the manual and put it back. Too late for that now, she muttered to herself. When Alexander returned at 2:00 p.m., he found Jessica sitting in his chair using his computer. What are you doing in my chair? Testing the ergonomics. You must have serious back problems. This chair is terrible for your posture. Get out of my chair immediately. Jessica stood up quickly, nearly tripping. I was just checking if I could access the system in case you ever need something urgently. You don't have a password. True, but your password is pretty obvious. Alexander stared at her, stunned. What do you mean, obvious? Stone 123. Very creative. Jessica gave an innocent smile. Maybe consider something more secure. You cracked my password. I didn't crack it. I guessed. I tried Alexander, CEO, Stone. Third attempt was the charm. You really should diversify. Alexander dropped into the chair, rubbing his temples. Jessica, you violated at least 6 security protocols today. But I solved the Mitchell contract issue. That has to count for something, right? He watched her for a long moment. Go home. We'll discuss boundaries tomorrow. Jessica picked up her bag, trying to figure out whether she was getting fired. Mr. Stone? What? Thanks for not firing me today. The day isn't over yet. Jessica smiled and waved as she headed toward the elevator. Alone in the office, Alexander Stone reopened the documents she had signed without realizing it. The solution was right there, clear as day, thanks to the accidental signature of a woman who'd mistaken a senior partner for a delivery person. He shook his head, somewhere between irritated and impressed. Jessica Parker was a walking catastrophe. But maybe she was exactly the kind of catastrophe he needed. On the 3rd day, Jessica decided it was time to show some initiative, and nothing said initiative like bringing coffee for the boss before he even asked. She arrived at 7:45, carrying 2 cups from the coffee shop around the corner. One for her, milk, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon, and one for Alexander. Since she had no idea how he preferred it, She went with a more humane version: milk, 2 sugars, and a touch of vanilla. "Good morning, Mr. Stone," she announced, walking into his office with both cups. "I brought coffee to start the day right." Alexander looked up from the documents he was already reading, his face neutral. "I didn't request coffee." "I know. That's why it's a surprise." Jessica placed the cup on his desk with a bright smile. "It's a latte with sugar and vanilla. I guarantee you'll love it." Alexander looked at the cup like it might detonate. "I drink my coffee black. Everyone drinks it black until they try a good latte. Come on, just 1 sip." Alexander picked it up, gave it a sniff, and made a barely noticeable grimace. "Jessica, I've been drinking black coffee for 15 years. No milk, no sugar, no vanilla. That's not coffee. That's liquid misery." Jessica sat in the chair across from him and took a sip of her own. "You need something that actually tastes good." Alexander took a small sip, his face contorting like he'd swallowed medicine. "This is too sweet." "You mean too delicious?" "No, too sweet. Overpowering. It tastes like joy. Like syrup for diabetics." Jessica stopped smiling. "Hey, I spent $5.50 on that coffee." "The least you could do is pretend to appreciate it." "I don't pretend, Jessica. And I didn't ask you to spend your money on me." "Wow." Jessica leaned back in her chair, stunned. "You really don't know how to accept a kind gesture, do you?" "It's not about kindness. It's about efficiency. I have a routine that's worked for years." "Routine?" Jessica gave a short laugh. "You mean that thing where you arrive, check emails, drink bitter coffee, ignore everyone around you, and leave? That routine?" Alexander set the cup down harder than necessary. "My routine brought me here. This company generates millions because I maintain high standards." "High standards or high walls?" Jessica leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you've built a fortress around yourself." "Jessica, no, let me finish," she pointed at him. "You treat coffee like it's life or death. You talk to people like they're malfunctioning machines, and I'm willing to bet that when you go home at night, you eat dinner alone watching financial reports." Alexander didn't answer, but his eyes flashed. "You don't know anything about my life. I know you look like a robot in an expensive suit who forgot how to smile." The silence that followed was so heavy Jessica could almost taste it. Alexander slowly stood up, placing his hands on the desk. "A robot. A very well-dressed robot," Jessica corrected, trying to keep her voice steady, "with a perfect schedule and a strong aversion to anything with flavor." "Jessica, you've been here 3 days. 3. And you think you can analyze my personality based on how I take my coffee? I don't need 3 weeks to notice you have the charm of a broken vending machine." Alexander walked around the desk and stopped right in front of her. Jessica swallowed hard, but didn't back down. "A broken vending machine? At least those accept coins." "You don't even do that. And before you complain about how honest I am, just remember you hired me because I'm not like the other well-behaved candidates." The phone rang just then, slicing through the tension like a blade. Jessica answered automatically without looking away from Alexander. "Stone Industries." Jessica speaking. "I need to speak to Alexander immediately. It's about the West Coast expansion proposal." Jessica recognized the voice. "Mr. Mitchell, the important client." "Mr. Mitchell, how are you, sir? Can I help you with anything before I transfer the call?" "Actually, yes. I'm concerned about the numbers we saw yesterday. The California market looks unstable, and I'm not sure this is the right time to expand." Jessica looked at Alexander, who was still standing beside the desk, clearly listening. "Mr. Mitchell, may I ask, are you concerned about short-term instability or long-term viability?" "Well, both, to be honest." Jessica bit her lip, thinking fast. "Have you seen the news about the new tax incentive legislation that passed in California last week?" Silence on the other end. What legislation? The Business Investment Incentive Act. It offers up to 35% in tax breaks for companies that establish operations there in the next 18 months. Jessica glanced at Alexander, who now looked surprised. If Stone Industries moves now, you could take advantage of that window and get a significant lead over competitors. I wasn't aware of that legislation. It passed last Thursday, but hasn't been widely reported yet. Most companies won't discover it until it's too late. Alexander stared at her in disbelief. Jessica, can you transfer the call now? He whispered. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. I'll transfer you to Mr. Stone right away, but if I may suggest, I'd recommend moving quickly. Opportunities like this don't come around often. Thank you, Jessica. You just saved my morning. Jessica transferred the call and leaned back in her chair, her heart racing. Alexander picked up on speaker. Mitchell, tell me I just heard what I think I heard. Alexander, that assistant of yours is a treasure. How did she know about that California legislation? I'd like to know that myself. The call continued for another 20 minutes. When Alexander finally hung up, he just looked at Jessica for a long moment. How did you know about that law? Jessica fidgeted with her bag strap. I read a lot, and when I don't have anything to do, I browse news websites. I saw the article Friday and thought it was interesting. You read California legislation in your spare time. I read everything, news, blogs, even medicine labels when I'm really bored. She shrugged. You never know when a random piece of information will be useful. Alexander sat back in his chair, still processing everything that had just happened. Jessica, you just gave Mitchell information that could be worth millions to us. Nice. Does that make up for the coffee you hated? Alexander almost smiled. Almost. The coffee was still terrible. And you still act like a robot, but a robot who occasionally admits when someone helped him. Outside the office in the open area, a small crowd had gathered near the coffee machine. Everyone pretended to be busy, but they were clearly trying to hear the conversation. Did she just call him what? Whispered Sophia from accounting. A robot in a suit, replied Carlos from legal, and a broken vending machine. She's insane, muttered Jennifer from marketing. Nobody talks to Alexander Stone like that. But it worked, said David, the intern. Did you see how focused he was when she spoke to Mitchell? She just saved $1 million contract. She'll be fired by Friday, predicted Sophia. I'm not so sure, said Carlos. Did you hear that call? She just saved a massive deal. Back in the office, Alexander was typing something on his computer. Jessica, about the coffee. I know. You like it black. No sugar, no flavor, no happiness. No vanilla, he corrected, this time with something close to a smile. I can tolerate the rest. Jessica blinked, surprised. Was that almost a joke? That was a factual correction. Of course it was. Jessica smiled. I'll bring plain black coffee tomorrow, but I'm still bringing colorful napkins just to annoy you. Jessica? Yes? Nice move with the California legislation. Jessica felt her face warm. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Alexander. You can call me Alexander. Really? Don't get used to it. It's only because you saved $20 million today. Jessica smiled and returned to her desk, feeling an odd sense of victory. Through the glass door, Alexander Stone watched his new assistant organizing files while humming quietly. She was a disaster, impulsive, stubborn, completely unpredictable, and exactly what he hadn't realized he needed, even if her coffee was truly awful. On Friday, Alexander walked over to Jessica's desk with an air of authority. You need to attend the company's annual gala, he announced, like he was discussing the weather. Jessica stopped organizing files and looked at him. I need to. It's mandatory for executive staff. But I'm an assistant. You're my executive assistant. Technically, you're part of the executive team. Jessica blinked a few times. Since when? Since you saved 3 contracts this week and discovered our accountant was overcharging for basic services. It was true. After the California legislation incident, Jessica had really thrown herself into the work, and apparently she had a natural talent for spotting problems no one else noticed. Alexander, I don't have anything to wear to a corporate gala. It's Saturday at 8. Wear something appropriate. Define appropriate. Alexander studied her for a moment, noticing the faded jeans and the colorful cat print blouse. Something without animals on it. On Saturday at 6 p.m., Jessica stood in front of a mirror at a dress rental shop, questioning all her life choices. This one is perfect for you, the saleswoman said, adjusting a stunning emerald dress. It catches the eye just right. Jessica looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was beautiful but definitely attention-grabbing. Emerald green, perfectly fitted with an elegant but bold neckline. Isn't it a little too green? Dear, you need to stand out. A corporate gala is a social battlefield. You either make an impression or you disappear. An hour later, Jessica was at the entrance of the 5-star hotel where the gala was being held, trying not to trip in high heels. The emerald dress stood out dramatically against the neutral, understated tones of the other guests. She took a deep breath and stepped into the elegantly decorated ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, tables with white linens, and a string quartet playing classical music in the background. This isn't a party, she muttered to herself. It's an elegant funeral. Trying to look confident, Jessica headed toward the bar. That's when her heels seemed to develop a mind of their own. She stumbled badly, arms flailing for balance. Unfortunately, her hands collided with a tray of champagne glasses the waiter was carrying. The tray flew through the air in slow motion. 6 crystal glasses crashed down, headed straight for Alexander Stone, who was talking with a group of investors a few feet away. "Oh no," Jessica whispered, watching the disaster unfold. Alexander turned just as the glasses were inches from his perfectly pressed tuxedo. With impressive reflexes, he dodged, making the champagne splash onto the floor instead of himself. The entire room went silent. Complete silence. Jessica stood there in the middle of the broken glass, her face as green as her dress. "I'm sorry." Alexander looked her over. His tux was spotless, though there were a few drops of champagne on his shoes. Instead of exploding as Jessica expected, he just let out a long sigh. "Are you all right?" What?" I asked if you're all right. "Did you cut yourself on the glass?" Jessica looked down, surprised by the question. "No, I don't think so." Alexander signaled to the waiter, who quickly started cleaning up the shards. "Let's get out of here," he said, offering her his arm. They walked over to a quieter balcony, away from the curious stares of the other guests. "Alexander, I'm so sorry. I know you hate being the center of attention." "I've survived worse," he said, taking a deep breath. "Better now." Jessica leaned on the balcony railing. "You're not going to fire me for almost turning you into a champagne fountain?" Alexander leaned next to her. "I've considered worse things about you." That was almost a compliment. That was a factual observation. They fell silent for a few minutes, listening to the music drifting from inside. "Do you play piano?" Jessica asked suddenly. Alexander looked at her, surprised. "Why do you ask?" You were watching the pianist in there with such a thoughtful expression, like someone who understands the music differently. Observant. "So, do you play?" Alexander hesitated. "I used to as a child." "Why did you stop?" "My mother thought it was a waste of time. She used to say businessmen didn't need artistic hobbies." Jessica frowned. "That's nonsense. Music is important. Do you play anything?" "Guitar." Not very well, but I try. She smiled. I always wanted to learn piano, but I never had money for lessons. It's difficult at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's like learning another language. Exactly. Alexander looked at her with genuine interest. How did you know I played? Your hands. You have pianist fingers. Long, graceful. And when the music was playing, your fingers started moving on their own like they were playing in the air. Alexander looked down at his hands like he was seeing them for the first time. You're very observant for someone who trips on flat surfaces. Selective focus. It's a talent. They both laughed, an easy laugh that surprised them. Alexander, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you like birthday parties? His expression changed immediately. I hate them. Why? They always felt like obligations. My mother used to throw elaborate parties when I was a child, but they were more about impressing her friends than making me happy. I'd wear a suit, shake hands with adults pretending to care, and just wait for it to end. Jessica felt a pang in her chest. That's really sad. That's life. No, it's not. A birthday party should be about you, about people who actually care being there. So, what would your ideal party look like? Jessica thought for a moment. Pizza, great music, silly games, people laughing until their stomachs hurt, and a cake with way too much frosting. Because there's no such thing as too much frosting. That sounds chaotic. That sounds fun. Alexander was about to respond when the balcony door opened. Marcus from sales came stumbling out, slightly tipsy. Well, look who's here, he said, clearly drunk. The most beautiful assistant in the company. Jessica shrank a little. Hi, Marcus. Jessica, you look incredible in that dress. Marcus stepped closer than necessary. How about a dance? Thanks, but I'm talking with Alexander right now. Oh, come on, leave the boss for a few minutes. Marcus held out his hand. He won't mind. Actually, she said no, Alexander said, his voice suddenly ice cold. Relax, Alexander. It's just a dance. Marcus ignored her refusal and reached for Jessica's hand. She pulled back, but he persisted and grabbed her wrist. Marcus, please. Come on. Don't be shy. Before Jessica could react, Alexander stepped in front of her, placing himself between them. Take your hands off her now. Hey, take it easy. Now. Alexander's voice left no room for argument. Marcus let go of Jessica's wrist immediately. Sorry, man. I didn't know you two were, Go back to the party and drink some coffee. Marcus left quickly, leaving them alone again. Jessica rubbed her wrist, even though Marcus hadn't really hurt her. Thank you. Does he always do that? Sometimes when he's had too much. It's never been serious, but it shouldn't happen. Jessica looked at Alexander, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched. Are you okay? I'm fine. What matters is that you're okay. Something in the way he said that made Jessica's heart beat a little faster. Alexander? Yes? Thanks for not leaving me alone with him. Jessica? Yes. Thanks for reminding me that parties can be about more than just obligations. They looked at each other for a moment that lasted longer than it probably should have. We should get back, Alexander said finally. Probably. But neither of them moved. Something had changed on that balcony. Something subtle, but real. And they both knew there was no going back. The following Monday after the gala, Alexander was quieter than usual. Jessica noticed he was checking his phone every 5 minutes and sighing more than any person reasonably should. Something wrong? She asked, sorting his mail on the desk. My mother's coming to Boston. Is that bad? She wants to introduce me to a friend's daughter, a lawyer, Yale graduate, perfect for starting a successful family. He made air quotes, clearly annoyed. Jessica stopped sorting papers. And you don't want to meet her? Jessica, I know the type. She'll talk about expensive wine, European vacations, and how she plans to support my career while redecorating an apartment that isn't even hers yet. Wow. Do you have a problem with ambitious women? I have a problem with people who see me as a life project instead of a person. The phone rang before Jessica could answer. Alexander glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's her. Answer it. I can step out if you want privacy. No, stay. Maybe having you here will stop me from saying something I'll regret. Alexander picked up and put it on speaker. Hi, Mom. Alexander, darling, I'll be arriving Thursday at 2. I already booked lunch for Friday at the Four Seasons with you and Caroline. Mom, I already told you I can't. Caroline Whitman, degree in corporate law, Harvard graduate. Comes from a very respectable family. You two will get along beautifully. Jessica watched as Alexander ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Mom, I can't make lunch Friday. Why not? Alexander hesitated, glancing at Jessica with a desperate look. Because I'm already seeing someone. Silence on the other end. Seeing someone? Since when? Since a few weeks ago. Jessica's eyes widened as she realized where this was going. Alexander, you've never mentioned a girlfriend, because it's new, very new. What's her name? Alexander looked straight at Jessica, who was now shaking her head vigorously. Jessica, her name is Jessica. Jessica? What kind of name is Jessica? A beautiful name, Mom. She's special. Jessica covered her face with her hands. Well, then I want to meet her. Bring her to lunch instead of Caroline. Mom, this isn't Friday fun starting at the Four Seasons. No excuses. The call ended. Alexander and Jessica looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. You just used me as an excuse with your mother, Jessica finally said. I panicked. Alexander, I know it was stupid, but you heard her. Caroline Whitman, Harvard graduate, perfect family. She was planning our wedding before I even met the woman. Jessica stood and began pacing the room. This is insane. You're going to have to call her back and tell her the truth. Or you could help me out. Jessica stopped pacing. What do you mean? Just pretend to be my girlfriend for the afternoon so she'll stop trying to set me up. Alexander, this is a terrible idea. Please, Jessica. I'll buy you pizza for a month. Pizza won't cover the emotional trauma of meeting your mother. 2 months of pizza and a raise. Jessica looked at him for a long moment. How much of a raise? 15%, 25%, 20%. Deal, but if your mom hates me, it's on you. She's going to love you. Jessica let out a sarcastic laugh. Alexander, your mom's expecting Caroline Whitman, Harvard graduate. I'm Jessica Parker, college dropout, and I'm your assistant, executive assistant. Same difference. She'll hate me in the first minute. By Friday, Jessica was standing in front of the Four Seasons Hotel, wearing her one dressy outfit, navy blue, conservative, borrowed from her neighbor, and trying not to throw up from nerves. Alexander appeared beside her, perfect as ever. Ready? Definitely not. What's our story again? We met at work, started as friends, and things just developed from there. And how long have we been dating? 3 weeks. Okay, and what do I do for a living? You work with me in the strategy department. Alexander, I don't know anything about strategy. You saved 3 contracts this month. You know more than you think. They walked into the elegant restaurant. Margaret Stone was waiting at a table by the window. Jessica recognized her immediately. Perfectly styled silver hair, pearl necklace, posture that screamed high society. Alexander, darling. Margaret stood to hug her son. Then her eyes landed on Jessica with thinly veiled curiosity. Mom, this is Jessica. Jessica, my mother, Margaret Stone. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Stone, Jessica said, extending her hand. Margaret shook her hand briefly, clearly inspecting every detail. So, you're Jessica. Alexander hasn't told me much about you. He tends to be private, Jessica smiled, but in a good way. They sat down, and Jessica immediately dropped her napkin on the floor. As she bent to pick it up, she bumped her head on the table. Sorry, she mumbled, her face red. Margaret raised an eyebrow, watching the scene. Jessica, what field do you work in? Strategy. Mainly contract analysis. And what did you study? Jessica swallowed hard. Business administration, but I didn't finish college. You didn't finish, Margaret looked genuinely shocked. I had to start working to support myself. Sometimes life doesn't follow the timeline we plan, does it? Margaret blinked a few times as if processing that information. And your family? My mom's a nurse in Texas. My dad, well, he's been out of the picture for a long time. Oh. Margaret looked a bit uncomfortable with the honesty. But my mom's amazing. She worked double shifts to support me when I was a teenager. She's the strongest person I know. Alexander listened to the conversation, noticing how Jessica chose to answer with honesty instead of trying to impress. And do you plan to go back to college? Margaret asked. Maybe, but honestly, I've learned more on the job than I did in 2 years of lectures. What do you mean? Well, last week I helped save a $20 million deal by spotting a legal loophole the lawyers had missed. There's no college class that teaches that kind of instinct. Margaret looked at Alexander, who nodded in agreement. It's true, Jessica has a natural talent for finding solutions others miss. Interesting. Margaret took a sip of water. And your future plans? Jessica nearly choked on the question. Future plans with Alexander. Marriage? Family? Mom, Alexander cut in. It's fine, Jessica said. Mrs. Stone, I believe healthy relationships are built slowly. Alexander and I are getting to know each other. No rush, no pressure. No pressure. Exactly. It doesn't make sense to plan a future with someone you're still discovering. Alexander is surprising. I learn something new about him every day. Margaret looked between the two of them, clearly intrigued. And what have you learned so far? Jessica gave a warm smile. That he plays piano, that he hates birthday parties but loves classical music, that he's kinder than he seems and funnier than he knows. Alexander looked at her, a bit surprised. Funny. You have that dry sense of humor that catches people off guard. It's charming. Margaret watched their exchange with growing interest. Alexander never told me he played piano. He should start playing again, Jessica said. Talented people shouldn't abandon their gifts. Lunch continued with Jessica being surprisingly natural. She knocked over a few things, laughed a little too loud once, and asked a couple of overly direct questions. But she was also honest, funny, and truly curious about getting to know Margaret. By the time they said goodbye, Margaret gave Jessica a much warmer hug than at the start. It was a pleasure meeting you, Jessica. Same here, Mrs. Stone. Alexander, Margaret whispered to her son, while Jessica was distracted. She's different. In what way? Authentic. She's not trying to impress me. It's refreshing. After Margaret left, Alexander and Jessica walked quietly for a few blocks. So, Jessica finally asked, how'd I do? She liked you. Really? More than liked you. She was intrigued. My mother can't stand people who try too hard, but you were just yourself. Jessica smiled. Good. Pretending to be someone else is exhausting. Jessica? Yes. Thank you, really. You're welcome, but you owe me a 20% raise and 2 months of pizza. Deal. They both laughed, but something between them had shifted again. The lie had started to feel dangerously close to the truth. What did you think of Jessica and Alexander's story? Let us know in the comments and rate this story from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our incredible stories. Check out more amazing tales by clicking on our other videos.